So today we're going to talk about compound inequalities, which are inequalities that include and, or. So the same inequalities we've been doing, just one more step really added on. Let's look at an example. So I'm going to look at the compound inequality where x is greater than or equal to -2 and x is less than 4. So our solution for x has to be bigger than or equal to -2 and less than -4. It has to satisfy both of those inequalities. So if we think about what integers are solution integers, meaning we're going to use whole numbers, positive or negative. If we think about what integers are solutions here, we can have -2 because it says x is greater than or equal to -2. And if it's bigger than -2, we would have -1, 0, 1, 2. And then we just want x to be less than 4, so I can include 3, but I can't include 4 because there's no equal to. So these are integers that would satisfy these conditions. I have chosen values that are bigger than or equal to -2, but also less than 4. If I wanted to graph this on a number line, I could. I'm going to start with my inequality on the left here. X is greater than or equal to -2. So I'm going to have a closed circle at -2. And if I want the x's that are greater than, that means I'm going to shade towards the right. And then for x is less than 4, that's an open circle at 4. And I'm going to shade it to the left, which means my solution set is just this space in between here. So this is x is greater than or equal to -2, but also less than 4. We could also use interval notation for this. I have my smallest value being -2, and I'm going to use a bracket because that circle's bubbled in. It's including -2. And my largest value is 4, but this does not include 4, so I'm going to use a parenthesis. So we can still use our number lines and our interval notation for this. We're going to look at another example, similar but different. This one says x is less than or equal to -2, or x is greater than 4. So if we think about this first inequality here, x is less than -2, less than or equal to -2, I could have -2, but if I want numbers that are smaller than that, that would be -3, -4, and so on, getting smaller. For x is greater than 4, that would be the numbers 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. Just looking at integers. We know we can include decimals, but we're just going to include integers right now. So my x is smaller than -2, or it's bigger than 4. These two things can't happen at the same time. If I choose a number that's less than or equal to -2, such as -4 right here, that's not bigger than 4. Both can't happen at the same time. So that's different than above. When we had and, they were both happening at the same time. I had a number that was bigger than this and also smaller than this. but with our ors, they can't happen at the same time. So again, we can do a number line for this and interval notation. So here's a number line. We're going to start at -4. I'm going to graph my first inequality, x is less than or equal to -2. So that's a closed circle at -2. And then less than is to the left. Then we have or x is greater than 4. So I'm going to have an open circle at 4. And x is greater than 4, so I'm going to shade to the right. So notice here that our number line, they kind of point in opposite directions. That's how you know it's an or, and how you know that both things can't happen at once. Interval notation for this is still pretty much the same thing. I'm going to go smallest possible values to biggest possible values. So looking all the way on the left for my smallest value, I can go from -infinity, which always gets a parenthesis, up until -2, which gets a bracket because we're including -2. That circle's bubbled in. Or looking at my other part of the number line, my smallest value is 4, parentheses, because it's not included. And then we go all the way to +infinity, which always gets a parenthesis. So both can still have interval notation and also a number line. So we're going to practice some of these. We're going to write the inequality given the number line. So I'm going to give you a number line, and then we have to decide what the inequality is, if it's an or if it's an and what symbols we want to use. So our first one here, we have a closed circle here, pointing to the left, and then a closed circle here, pointing to the right. So this one, they're pointing opposite directions. They both can't happen at once, which tells me this is going to be an or. So I'm just going to write my two separate inequalities then. My first one, I have x, and we shaded the spot that was less than or equal to -1. And then for the right, my x's are greater than or equal to 3, or equal. I put the equal signs because both circles are shaded in. Next one. I'm going to draw this one a little differently just because sometimes you see them both ways. So I drew this one right on the number line because sometimes you'll see that. I just think sometimes it's hard to see, so that's why I do it above. But this one, it's shaded in between, which tells me both of these things are happening at the same time. Our number is bigger than 0, but also smaller than 6. So I'm going to write my inequality here. X is greater than or equal to 0, because we shaded the numbers that were bigger than 0, and we included 0. And x is less than 6, not including 6 because that's an open circle. Now there is another way you can write these. You can write it either way. The other way is you can kind of say, because we shaded between these two numbers, you can say that x is between 0 and 6. Literally put your x between 0 and 6. And then x's are bigger than 0, so we would face this way. And then x's are smaller than 6. They always face the same way if you do it that way. But those are two different ways you can write it. It does not matter which one, as long as you know one of these ways. Alright, we'll do just two more here. So this one, we have x is between 5 and 7. We are not including 5 or 7, so I'm going to have no equal signs there. So that's one way you can write it. X is between 5 and 7. X is bigger than 5, looking at this part. And then x is less than 7, looking at that part. The other way you could write this, we have x is bigger than 5, and x is less than 7. Either one works. The last one, so here they are pointing opposite directions, which tells me it's one or the other. Both can't happen at the same time. So I have here that x is less than 0, or my second part of the number line, x is greater than or equal to 3.